Courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast. This is episode number 463. I am Andrew in our forum, and Andrew NLSC on Twitter. Joining me as always, my co-host Derek, D3 in our forum, and also on Twitter at D3G and D384. Derek, are you ready to give our listeners an astonishing episode?
Well, astonishing is not the word that I would use for this episode, and we'll get to why that is a little bit later. First, I want to talk about a positive. How fun was that NBA Live 10 co-op session that we just had using the Nuggets versus the CPU Knicks at Madison Square Garden?
First time we've played co-op in NBA Live 10. We started out going head-to-head in that game and had a blast many times and using those retro teams, those makeshift retro teams we put together. But man, yeah, I want to play some more co-op games of that now.
Makes me want to start a season. I was thinking about that. If we find time, maybe we do it with like 6-minute quarters or whatnot. I know we both have busy schedules, but it'd be really fun to do a co-op season on that game. There were so many fun plays. We had back-to-back alley-oops to Birdman, Chris Anderson, and Andrew, right after the second one, sent me a text on Twitter stating, Birdman! With exclamation points, yeah. I had a monstrous block on a dunk right at the rim with Nene. And we had some nice ISO plays with Carmelo Anthony, J.R. Smith, obviously, attacking the rim and hitting threes and everything. I had a blast during that session. And I can't believe that's the first time we played co-op on NBA Live 10.
Well, it was our go-to for head-to-head for so long, and that was so much fun. And doing the fantasy drafts, the fantasy teams mode in that game, and as I said, the makeshift retro teams, it never really occurred to us to go co-op. But that's something we've been doing more and more lately, playing co-op together, which works a little bit better because of the my connection, being in Australia, doesn't have the best connection to the US, although Parsec still overcomes that very impressively. But sometimes it can be a bit hard for me with a little bit more lag, based on where I am, because of Australian internet, of course, it's sometimes hard to compete. But when we play co-op, we just have fun beating up on the CPU as we did. Although, thanks to Al Harrington, they did make a bit of a comeback towards the end there. I thought they might even get it down to single digits, but no, we pulled it out. But no, a lot of fun. Even starting a playoffs in that game. They brought playoffs mode back that year, so that'd be fun too.
Yeah, and how about New York Knicks legend Darko Milicic in that fourth quarter, putting down 2 big dunks and had a big putback layup that was also helping them get back into the game.
Should have brought him in earlier.
They should have. Yeah, they should have. David Lee wasn't doing too much in that game, but that Knicks team is interesting. It's Chris Duhon, Wilson Chandler, Gallinari, David Lee. They had Darko on the bench and whatnot. They have some good players, but it's definitely not one of the best teams in the league. And it's cool because we were using Melo on the Nuggets. And this is, right before he ended up going to the New York Knicks and becoming their star player and whatnot. So, no, that was a super fun session. I think that game just plays so well co-op because it flows really well. Like, it's really fun to get out on the break. Your players don't stop to catch passes. They keep moving towards the hoop. The computer is actually really solid as far as moving around off the ball. So if you're standing up there with Billups at the top of the key and say you have J.R. Smith and Carmelo Anthony on the wings and you're not using them, it's the computer using them, they're going to try to run through the baseline to be able to catch the ball on the wings. They're going to be doing face cuts. They're going to be setting down screens for the big men and everything. I really like the AI in NBA Live 10, and it works really well during the co-op experience because if you're on Birdman and you're trying to stay out of the way, the computer is going to move into an appropriate spot where they can catch a pass from me, and then I can use that player and make a move. So, yeah, I think that the computer plays well. I think the game plays well for co-op, and I'm going to be uploading that gameplay video soon to the NLSC YouTube, and that'll be fun to watch.
I'm looking forward to watching it back again because it did feel like we had a lot of great plays, a lot of exciting moments. The drawback with Live 10 and NCAA Basketball 10, of course, is that the alley-oops don't work quite as well. But when we got those back-to-back ones with Birdman, yeah, that fires you up. That was really cool to see. It is unfortunately also missing a set pick button with the off-ball controls that they kind of lost that year. They had pick-and-roll control, which was great for single player, but it is unfortunate because I was trying to set picks and I was trying to remember how to do that with those controls because I hadn't played Live 10. I did play it last night actually solo, but I hadn't played for a while and certainly not off ball playing co-op. So I actually, during one of the free throws, I actually pulled out the manual for the Xbox 360 version out of the drawer and had a look and just to see if I was forgetting how to do it. But no, unfortunately, there's no set pick button that I could see. So I was kind of getting in your way a couple of times trying to set a pick and then realizing, oh no, I can't actually do that. But the pick and roll control works really well. I actually called for an off-ball screen on a cut, and with J.R. Smith, that ended up with a really nice play there. And yeah, it just, as you say, it flows really well, especially compared to playing Live 09 on PS2 last week and having the players stop on the fast break. It was definitely a nice change of pace from that. And Chris Duhon, actually, I remember him putting up some pretty big numbers against me playing solo back in the day. He's kind of like that. Another virtual hardwood legend, if you will, from his performances in NBA Live 10. Bit of point guard domination issues at times, but it might have been some of his DNA ratings at one point in the rosters just made him a bit of an overpowered beast. But no, we shut him down together.
Yeah, I thought our defense was stellar. I want to say that in the first quarter at one point we had him shooting like 3 for 14 or something like that because both of us were closing out really well on the shooters. And then when they attacked the rim, both of us were timing our contests very, very well. We also had an excellent session on NBA Live 98. And I know you appreciated this because it was using the 97-98 NLSC roster that has Jordan on the Bulls, but we did Bulls at home versus the Utah Jazz, which was the finals matchup that year. And once again, playing co-op, we had a lot of good plays. You were in the top 10 this week with a swat at the three-point line with Scottie Pippen on John Stockton. Then you went the length of the court and threw down a double pump reverse dunk. Like you said, you wished it wasn't Pippen, you wish it was Jordan, but hey, it was still a great highlight.
Take it, yeah.
Deserved to be in the top 10. But this was another game where you and I were down. We were down 9 in the fourth quarter. I think it was 54 to 45.
Sounds about
and
right.
There was only a couple minutes left. And I always know that you and I are not we're never out of a game. Like I feel like we're always going to give ourselves the best chance to make a comeback and get a W. And once again, we were able to do that. We were able to get that game into overtime. And then Jordan kind of took over in overtime and we won it. But Live 98 on that classic cam, that isometric cam review, playing co-op and having loose, clean fun, that was a great experience.
And it is the PC version, so upscaled using the using N-Glide and looks pretty damn good in 1080.
Yeah, I've had a couple compliments on the video stating that it looked really, really good. And what do you think is the biggest improvement from, and I'm going to bring up NBA Live 2000, from NBA Live 2000 over NBA Live 98? Because I play both of those games and there definitely are some similarities. And both of those are couple of the best games in the entire NBA Live series. But I can enjoy those two games on the floor pretty much evenly. Like, I have a lot of fun with both. But what do you think they improved on with NBA Live 2000 from a gameplay perspective?
I think they added some more animations. I think driving is a bit better as well in NBA Live 2000. In NBA Live 98, you do have that dedicated drive and dunk button, which the dunk button became the direct shoot in the latter two, in 99 and 2000. I think it was through to 2001 as well, from memory. A mechanic that I've overlooked way too often back in the day. But it just, driving to the hoop was a little bit smoother. You didn't need to have a button to, you could just, using using dribbling moves and sprint and good positioning and picking the gaps and whatnot, you could make those moves in Live 2000, whereas with Live 98, you did have to have that drive button. It served its purpose for the timer, I suppose. Actually, I wasn't using it because I didn't have the controller configured completely because I didn't have it in the old D input mode rather, so I couldn't use the extra triggers on my controller. So it is a bit harder to drive when you're not using that control. So I think that is one of the improvements. Obviously, the graphics are better, but that's neither here nor there with gameplay. As we've said before, that it's easier to overcome more primitive graphics with great gameplay than it is to overcome great graphics with horrible gameplay. I'd probably say the AI is a little bit better as well, a little bit smarter, and some of the shot selection by the CPU opponents. But yeah, it holds up pretty well. They're pretty close. NBA Live was really on a roll at that point in time.
Yeah, so I would agree that the AI is better in NBA Live 2000. My brother and I have played many games on both, had seasons started on both, where we were playing against the CPU, and they're better at moving the ball, taking better shots, all of that stuff. But on NBA Live 98, I like the shooting better. It's before the Antoine Walker shot animation took over from NBA Live 99. I like the feeling of shooting fadeaways and straight up and down shots better on NBA Live 98 than I do Live 2000. It feels more natural. I like the way the ball releases and whatnot. As far as Live 2000 advantage, I like dunking in traffic a lot more on Live 2000 because I've shown video of it, of me charging to the rim with Wilt Chamberlain and just throwing it down on multiple defenders and they go crashing to the floor and whatnot. They definitely added more dunk animations in NBA Live 2000 and more contact animations as well. But I can just have a blast with both of those games still. And we've talked about how fun that shared experience is. And it's just always better with a friend or one of my brothers, etc. But yeah, Live 98 session was great. We got destroyed by Stockton for a good portion of the game, and he was probably the biggest reason why they went up 9 in the fourth quarter, because he kept hitting threes on us and pulling up in the middle of the lane and everything. He was more destructive offensively than Karl Malone. But we had some really strong performances from Jordan, from Pippen, Rodman on the boards. Longley had a few big dunks in there. Kerr failed us off the bench and didn't hit 1-3, which is incredibly rare. But yeah, I'm glad that we were able to pull out that win in OT.
I'd also have to say the blocks are better in 2000. And they were even improved a bit in 99 as well, I think. Just that... just being able to get the blocks. And rebounds to a certain extent. There's still a lot of rebounds on the floor in 98 and 99. 2000 did clean that up a little bit.
Yeah, blocks and steals, I will agree, are better in NBA Live 2000. I definitely agree with that. But what do you think of, because I don't know what camera view you played on growing up. I'm guessing you played on TV or broadcast. And when I played NBA Live 98 back in the day, I also usually played on like a broadcast camera angle. But I've warmed up so much to that classic isometric NBA Live 95-esque camera view that were in those games. And any game that I put on, an example, NBA 2K8 with like their crowd cam, any game that has a similar camera view, I always like put that on and try it out because I just love the view of the floor. I love the NBA Live 95 legend behind it and everything. What did you think of that game that we played on that classic isometric view?
I mean, it's very nostalgic because of the Live 95 and actually Live 96. I mostly played Live 96 on that, what then became known as Classic Cam. It's basically the NBA Live 95 camera. 96, they brought in the baseline cam and all of the broadcast cams as well, and really just expanded it. 1 year, again, NBA Live 96 PC was such a huge jump over 95, which is not to say 95 is a bad game by any stretch of the imagination. Just 96 hit the ground running and took it even further. But I did play Classic on 96. 97, I think I played Classic a bit, but then started going to the broadcast views more, and then over the years did go broadcast whenever that was available, and just stayed on that broadcast TV style. But I do enjoy playing on the Classic game because it does take you back to the introduction to NBA Live with NBA Live 95 and playing that on Super Nintendo as I did, and yeah, it's just very different, and it's a pretty good view of the court. It gives you a pretty good view of the action. There are times on broadcast camera where, depending on the zoom, especially if you're playing co-op, you can end up off-screen. And so that doesn't happen as much with Classic Cam.
Yeah, I really love the view of the court. So before we move on, I wanted to get your opinion on the best play of our NBA Live 10 co-op session using the Nuggets. I thought we had quite a few great plays in that game, but what was your favorite? What got you the most pumped?
I'll give you two. I'll give you that first alley-oop with to Birdman, the first alley-oop to Birdman, and your block with Nene. was just spectacular. Just a huge swat on a dunk.
Yeah, that looked incredibly realistic, that swat, because he was it Gallinari? I think it might have been Gallinari.
I think it was Gallo, yeah.
Yeah, he cocked back on that dunk like he was ready to really throw it down on me. And I came over from the weak side with Nene, and I timed my jump perfectly, and I blocked the dunk at the height of Gallo's jump. And you'll see that on the highlight reel when I upload it to the NLSC YouTube. It looks awesome. Like, that's cool no matter what game you're playing, like when that happens. But it just looked especially awesome in NBA Live 10. But yeah, I agree. I got super pumped with the Chris Anderson, Birdman, alley-oop, the first one. And I think that actually was a pass from Nene. And then that block, right after it happened, Andrew quickly grabbed his phone, or if he was on the computer or his keyboard, and messaged me on Twitter and said, "What a block." And for some reason, I heard Marv Albert in my head.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that was great.
So those would be your two favorites as well?
I think so. I had a couple plays with Mello where I did a couple between the legs dribbles and then pulled up in mid range, and the net blew up when it went in. And those I always love those plays. They're very realistic. There's almost nothing like completing a play in a video game using an NBA player and it be a play that they would complete in real life, right? Like, that just adds so much to the immersion. And then there was a play where it's a play you had where I missed a three, pretty good look from the top of the key with Chauncey Billups, and it back rimmed, and you caught the offensive rebound with Kenyon Martin, and you went up and flushed it with a really loud two-handed jam. Very, very Kenyon Martin-esque. And so those sequences, stand out to me.
See, when that happened, I thought of the NBA Live 2003 soundtrack and Blau, crash boards like Kenyon Martin. That came to mind immediately when that happened. No, some great plays there. And Scott Burrell, we can't gloss over that Scott Burrell hit the big shot.
Wait a minute. Yeah, we got to talk about this.
In the Live 98 game, yeah.
So Andrew, we're playing NBA Live 98, and I'm hosting, so I'm controlling the subs and whatnot. And I kept getting pissed at the game because it kept taking Tony Kukoc out for Scott Burrell. And I'm like, I want Kukoc in the game. Listen, Kukoc is a better player. I want Kukoc to spread the floor. I want his versatility. I want his size. Get Kukoc in the game and stop putting Scott Burrell in. So the computer finally won. I had ripped out Scott Burrell like 3 or 4 times in a row, and they just kept putting him back in. And so I was like, all right, computer, you've won. The next possession, Jordan drives the lane. I want to say it was Jordan. And the defenders converge on him. And he swings it out to the corner. And guess who's standing there completely wide open? Our favorite player, Scott Burrell. And he absolutely smokes a three, a key three. And without that three, we never would have made it to overtime.
That's a game-tying three.
That's the game-tying three. That's right at the end of the game. And it's like an open apology to Scott Burrell here. I'm sorry. I misjudged you. Maybe you should have been in all along, because that was a huge shot.
I do remember him hitting a few big shots in that 98 championship season.
He's not a terrible player. He's just not Tony Kukoc. Like, I don't think he was ever as good as an all-around player as Kukoc. No. I wouldn't take him on my team over Kukoc. Speaking of which, I was watching a 99-2000 game really quick. It was playing on NBA TV, and it was the Sixers with Iverson and Kukoc and Ratliff. Kukoc and Ratliff were still there. And, man, Kukoc was still good. Like, he was still really good there with the 76ers. And I'll always say this. I know that the Sixers went to the finals with Iverson and Mutombo. And during that season in 2000-2001, they had the trade that sent Kukoc and Theo Ratliff away because Ratliff was injured and whatnot. But I still say, and I'll say it till I die, that the 76ers were better with Kukoc and Ratliff than they were with Mutombo. They just, the offense looked better. It flowed better. Ratliff was a ridiculous rim protector. He also gave a little bit more at times, like right under the basket and whatnot, like on the offensive end. It's a shame that Ratliff had to get hurt and that trade had to happen, because I thought that the Sixers were better with Iverson, Kukoc, and Ratliff than they were with Iverson, Mutombo.
I mean, I think the Lakers were winning that championship no matter what, but the 76ers might have put up a bit more of a fight if they'd had that younger Ratliff, who, as you say, could give them a bit more scoring, was a very good defender in his own right, have that extra scoring punch of Kukoc alongside of Iverson. Yeah, that's a huge what if.
Right, but still, sorry, Scott Burrell. My
Yes.
apologies. You proved me wrong, and I'm forever grateful.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, NBA-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community. So a couple of really fun sessions there. Actually, I've been trying to change it up this week, Derek, playing a few different games. You know how I get hooked on a game like 2K14, and I have indeed played that this week and continued my career, and that's still been a lot of fun, and there's a new My Career Stories video coming out very soon. But playing a bit of NBA Live 10 by myself and with you, Live 98 with you, NBA 2K6, NBA 2K17. Yeah, I've been trying to change it up a bit this week, and it's been fun.
So Andrew sends me highlights on Twitter of the games he's playing at the time. If something really cool happens or interesting happens, and these are the games I've seen over the week. I've seen NBA 2K17, NBA 2K14, and NBA Live 10. And there is a really cool video that Andrew is uploading to the NLSC YouTube from NBA Live 10, and that's scheduled to be published on the 6th of February. And I think that a lot of people are going to enjoy that. I think NBA Live 10 is still, looked at fondly, especially from the NLSC community. But I think in the basketball gaming community in general, a lot of people call it the last great release for
absolutely, yeah.
EA Sports NBA Live. So I think that you'll make a lot of people happy with that video.
No, I hope that they do. And it's funny because I actually played that game to get a short clip at the start, just the intro of the game for that aforementioned My Career Stories video, because I wanted to put that in there as part of the introduction into the topic, and then ended up playing the game and thought, you know what, I'll just turn this into a whole thing and make two videos for the price of one, if you will. So that was really enjoyable to make. Looking forward to that going live.
Andrew and his Elgato, everybody. He still has the itch to create YouTube content from his PS3, PS4, etc., because he's got that Elgato hooked up. He's recording in 60 FPS, and the footage looks great. So I hope this kick stays.
Oh, it will.
I hope this YouTube kick stays, because I think the content is great.
No, it definitely will. And actually, some of the clips I sent you were actually from PC, using Morales Action, which has been working out really well for me as well.
Yeah, and I actually just recorded our highlights using Action, from our NBA Live 10 game, and I was watching them back before we started recording, and I'm like, damn, this looks good. So I think you guys are going to like that footage.
No, you've definitely got me into the habit of recording my games. I think you might actually keep a bit more footage than I do. I usually only just keep the clips that I want. If I record a full game, I don't keep the full game usually. I just keep the clips of what I need. Or if nothing really happened during that session, like it was fun, but there was nothing really spectacular that I want to keep, I might actually discard the recording. I don't know if you do that as well, but no, I'm definitely in the habit now of recording. Every time I play with it on PC or on console, I'm either hooking up the Elgato to the console or firing up Action on PC to just in case something cool happens.
Well, I just love the time shift option on Action and on Elgato. So useful. For Action, yeah, I have it set for 12 seconds. And if you think about a great basketball play, or even if you're just taking game highlights, how many take more than 12 seconds?
Yeah.
Even two-way plays are caught in that 12 seconds. So I found that being a good time to set the Action to. And Elgato is every 15 seconds, so it gives me a little bit more time as well. But time shift is excellent because you don't have to record the whole game. So from the NBA Live 10 game that we just played, which I recorded with Action, I think there were 38 highlights That's what it looked like when I took a brief peek. And so all I have to do is throw those 38 highlights into Movavi Video Suite, which I know you love, and maybe I have to trim a couple of them and whatnot, but I can make a highlight video really fast.
Yes.
By doing it this way. And I think that's like the huge benefit of Time Shift and also the greatness of Movavi Video Suite.
So once again, I mean, we're not being paid for this. This is not a paid advertisement, but the tools that we use, Movavi for video production, Action for capturing clips on PC, Elgato, and Elgato 60, we have the older ones, but they still hold up really well. They just do the job. Some of the newer ones that have got USB 3, they also have live play, so on the capture software, it actually has no delay whatsoever. You and I, we don't need that the way we're producing videos. Get one of those if you want to get into video production, people. It's cannot recommend them enough.
Yeah, they don't sponsor us, but they could.
Oh, yeah.
Avi, you want to sponsor us? Elgato? Yeah, I mean, we talk you up. Parsec? Come on, we talk you up so much.
Absolutely.
Just kidding. We don't care. We love your programs.
We'll happily promote them. That's the thing.
For so many of our listeners, though, Andrew, I want to bring this up. So for so many of our listeners, they also tune into our NLSC YouTube content. And if you like what you see there and you are on PC and you want to start kind of like maybe you want to create your own YouTube, or maybe you want to, maybe you have an existing YouTube and you want to, up the quality of your recordings and your videos that you put there. I absolutely 100% recommend for PC recording. So like whether it be recording your screen on PC, whether it be recording just an application or an area of your screen, etc., I absolutely recommend Action. It's Marillis Action, and it's only $20. And you don't have to renew it every year. It's $20 for the life of the product. It's amazing. For video editing, so like dropping your highlights in an editor and cutting them down, or using special effects, using black and white or VHS or grayscale, all of that stuff, creating intros, all of that stuff. I absolutely 100% recommend Movavi Video Suite. Yes, it can be like $50 or $60 or something like that up front, but it's worth it. It is so easy to use. Andrew absolutely loves it. I got Stildo33 using it, and he's been using it to do his Len Bias videos for his channel. It is awesome. And then, like Andrew said, Elgato is king when it comes to console recording, and it's a lot better the majority of the time than the internal recorder that's on a console, and you always get that great quality. So Elgato, Marillis Action, and Movavi Video Suite. All of them are awesome.
And perhaps we can put some more resources together for this, but a couple of tips as well. As you said, the internal recorder on consoles, it can do in a pinch, but it doesn't always record in 60 FPS, certainly not for older games. There may be audio blocked because of copyright issues, so that will not be an issue when you record with Elgato. With some consoles, you do need to turn off the HDCP setting, that is the encryption for HDMI. Turn that off, otherwise it will be blocked when you try to record with Elgato. With some models of the PS3, you can't turn that off, but you can just get a splitter that does the HDCP bypass, and that'll work just fine. As far as general content creation, I'll also put this out there, Derek, that it's the same when I write articles as well, that I always get more screenshots than I need, just in case I need some extra ones. I always get more footage than I think I need if I'm putting together the My Career Stories video or some other kind of video essay or retrospective or whatever. Always get more footage than you think you need, so that you'll not have to repeat clips. I mean, sometimes there are times when you will repeat clips in a video essay and such, but always get more than you think you need. That way you'll never have to really just repeat clips over and over again if there's no need to.
Andrew knows exactly what I'm doing when we're having a co-op session and he sees me go into like instant replay, and I'll like zoom in on a player and try to get the perfect angle. And Andrew's super patient because he knows exactly what I'm doing. I'm getting that, that angle and that perfect shot for a thumbnail, or, something to share on Twitter, or, I'm getting maybe the perfect angle for an instant replay for a highlight that I want to include in a video. And it's fun to do that for me. I know that that's probably not fun for everybody, but it's fun to, capture a highlight again, via instant replay at a different angle than it happened during the when we were playing on broadcast or classic cam or anything like that. So I love doing it, but I know you know exactly what I'm doing when that's happening, and you're very patient with it.
Oh, for sure, because I know the importance of getting that great thumbnail and getting that right replay, because sometimes the instant replay either happens in 30 FPS and isn't ideal, or it doesn't show a great angle or as much of the plays you'd like either. So it's always worth going into instant replay and getting a better look, even if you do have that instant replay on. And I know you prefer to play with that off or as minimal settings as possible. I tend to actually use that instant replay a lot, as you know, but it definitely can have its drawbacks. But that is something that we do recommend, those utilities and software. You know what I don't recommend, Derek? Astonishing Basketball Manager.
So we talked about this game a couple episodes ago, but we didn't name the game because we hadn't seen it on Steam yet, right? We wanted to make sure that the game was officially out there, that the microtransactions were officially in it. We wanted to make sure that we saw some reviews from after the game was published, right? Like after it was officially released. And so this game is now available on Steam. I want to say that it's roughly $8.
Yep.
To purchase this game up front. So it's not a free to play plus make microtransactions. It's a pay $8 up front and you're going to pay for microtransactions. And from everything that I can see, it's like a text-based basketball manager game. And I know that you have one of the reviews up in front of you, so I want you to go over that. But it's not an innocent basketball manager game, from what I can tell.
No, it's very disappointing. The review is from Melwing. That's Josh, who we actually referred to on the show. When we talked about this, he brought it to our attention. He is a member of the NLSC community, former member of the NLSC team, in fact, as Donatello. And Josh, or Melwing as he also goes by, did leave this review and noted that microtransactions in a text-based basketball simulator, wholly blown you. No thanks. $1.99 to have a star player join your team, and $1.69 to get 3,100 quote-unquote training points to hire coaches, etc. And says that might be okay if this game was free to play, but it isn't. Gross. And it absolutely is, because it sounds like a lot of basic functionality that you just expect to grind through. I mean, this is the way, unfortunately, of many modern games, especially those that are kind of like your free-to-play games that have that free-to-play model, that you can pay for boosts or if you're impatient. But there is still a way to grind. It may not be as fun. It may take a lot longer, but it is there. But it sounds like the microtransactions are really, really forced in this game.
Yeah, so we talked about it on a previous episode, how one of the developers basically shut down the criticism of the microtransactions on a thread. And somebody was like, basically, how can you justify charging us, this amount of money to hire assistant coaches or to recruit players, etc., in a text-based basketball game? This is gross. And they were basically like, we're not going to talk to you about it, because the developers, suits, etc., who push microtransactions, they, as I stated before, they don't want to be called out on it. The last thing is they don't want to talk about it. They don't want it in reviews. They don't want it in discussions in general. They don't want light shined on the microtransaction portion of their game, because there's no positives that come from that, right? Like, there's no reasoning that can be given that is appropriate to the consumer that says, oh, okay, yeah, you should have microtransactions in your game. Like, these should exist over the base price of your game, etc. You should be reaching into my pocket like this. Like, they do not want that conversation happening. So it is very disappointing. I will not be buying this game. I will not be downloading it. And if anybody asks me, if I recommend the game, I'll say, do your research, look at the reviews, but I would not recommend this game to you.
And there are a couple of responses to Melwing's review there that say, thank you for this, because I was thinking about getting it, but if this is the way that microtransactions are handled in this game, no thanks, and understandably so, rightfully so. And it is ubiquitous in gaming these days. It's a real shame, and some people do buy into it. Oh, it's needed for the games to be produced, it's needed for the developers. It goes to the suits people, or it goes to a greedy free-to-play lone developer making an asset flip, or some cheap game that is just ripping people off with forced microtransactions. So don't buy into all of the garbage about, oh, we absolutely need microtransactions to have a great experience. No, we don't. In fact, if you look at the W in NBA 2K23, Derek, the starting ratings of your WNBA player in that mode, and the way you can just jump into that mode and play online and play the W online and that mode straight away, show that that approach that they take in the NBA side of my career is absolutely unnecessary for the experience. It's all about generating that revenue and at the expense of fun. So it's
right.
And
no
that's
excuse.
Why they
don't want to have that conversation.
That's
right. There's not going to be any, like, they're not going to bring up microtransactions, be like, hey, let's talk about it. Right? Like, that's not a conversation they want people having. They just want people to be talking about, the gameplay or the modes, or they want to like shift all the focus off of microtransactions. So yeah, not surprising at all. I do like the fact that people are speaking up about it in the reviews of that game, and the game was just released recently on Steam. And I also want to point out, he mentioned $1.99 and $1.69 for different types of transactions in that game. You people who listen to this, you do know that that's probably not all you would spend. Like, it doesn't sound terrible. It's like, oh, well, $4 over the price of an $8 game. But you notice it says it's $1.69 to get like 3,100 training points. You think that you're not going to need more training points soon after, or even at the same time you spend that $1.69? You think that $1.99 for a star player gets you star players, limitless star players for the game? Absolutely not. So, like, you got to think about how this works. It's supposed to make you keep spending. That's the point of it. It's not going to end up being, $12 for a text-based basketball manager after you spend, your initial microtransactions. It's probably going to end up being 20, 30, 40, or $50, or maybe even more. And I'm not going to buy the game in order to find out, because I don't want to give the developers my money. So, yeah, there's a big picture aspect of this, and it's not just $8 or $2, etc.
Exactly, and it's gross, the response to that, and weaseling out with an ad hominem. Oh, you said JFC, you're being rude, so we won't address it. Total cop out, and good on Josh for calling that out and putting that review there to let other people know. But that's not going to join our vast collections, Derek.
No, absolutely not.
So there's another topic we wanted to get to this week, and this comes courtesy of a suggestion of Kid Cash. Shout out to you as always, about an article over on Operation Sports. Started out as a forum thread, and then Chase turned it into an article. And it's a very interesting topic for franchise enthusiasts, and it's about rosteritis, that when do you get sick of a franchise? How do you struggle to keep interested in a franchise when there are real moves happening in real life? And then you can't play with the updated rosters because you can't apply them to a franchise game already in progress. And you and I are both franchise enthusiasts over the years, Derek. We play them in very different ways, though, so we might have different takes on this topic.
Yeah, and I mean, I've dabbled in franchises in the past the way that you historically play them, as in, taking like a regular NBA team into a season and, trying to work with the assets that the game gave you. The team that was officially there and really there, at the time that game was made and whatnot. And I have done that before, and I'm not against doing it again in the future. But, in order to avoid that mess that was just brought up as far as, real life transactions taking place when you've already started a season and then you feel like you have to start the season over, etc. We do fantasy drafts, because then it's just a complete fantasy scenario. You're still using your favorite players, you're still using real NBA players, etc. But you're in a fantasy scenario where basically anything goes, and you can include real transactions in that scenario if you'd like. You can, trade players around. You can use the salary cap, all of that, but it's a complete fantasy scenario. And then we also do co-op legends versus the regular NBA team. So that's another fantasy scenario where we're putting the greatest players of all time on a 14-man roster, 14, 15-man roster, and we're just taking on the computer with stat goals and whatnot. And so we don't have to worry about what's going on in the real life NBA and then stress over that and then quit our season. So yeah, I think that there's a guy, and I'm going to mention his name, and this is I like this guy. Him and I we follow each other on Twitter. His name is Dion. And he is constantly starting seasons on games, whether it be MLB The Show or if it's on, NBA 2K23. He's constantly starting a season, getting through a few games, and then starting over. And he'll apologize to his Twitter followers. He's like, guys, I thought I was going to, use this team, and then I didn't really enjoy myself, or something bugged me about it. So now what team do you think I should use? Should I use this team? And then he'll start another franchise, and he'll get a few games in, and then he'll quit again. And I don't think that is uncommon. And I understand why he has trouble choosing a team and sticking with a team, because there's so many different variables involved, right?
Oh, no question.
As far as, how strong is your roster? Are they fun to use on the floor? Are they well made in the game, or are you going to have to edit them a ton before you put them on the floor? What type of scenario do you want? Do you want a team that's middle of the pack, or do you want a team that's, bottom of the barrel, bottom of the standings, and you're going to try to bring them to the promised land? Well, that could not be that fun on the floor, because you're going to get your butt kicked most of the time if you're playing on one of the harder levels. Or are you going to use a team that's already established and already winning a ton? Maybe you're using the Boston Celtics with the Jays, right? And Rob Williams and whatnot. And then, is that as fun because now you feel like you want to quit when you lose to a team that's inferior, right? So there's so many different variables that come with trying to do like a realistic season and using a team that's already in the game, like a stock team, and using one of the stock teams for the real NBA.
Oh, absolutely. And of course, franchise modes do invite you to put on the GM suit and start wheeling and dealing and making your own moves and creating your own scenarios and fantasies. And this, what you described, is exactly what happened in the stories section of the NLSC forum. Many times over the years that people would start a thread and they're very excited about it, but they play a few games and it doesn't really go their way, or they realise the team's not so fun to play with, or something happens and and then they stop and start another one. And the best stories were the ones people who could stick with what they had picked, and they'd made a proper choice and an informed decision about they knew what was going to be most enjoyable for them in their dynasty or association or my league, my NBA, etc. games over the years, and were able to stick with it. But it happens, as you say. There are so many variables. For me, I also go with that. It's okay once you start a game that it devolves into fantasy and fiction. I like to have a realistic start. I prefer to start with the real NBA rosters and then allow them to evolve into something crazy and wacky and wonderful as the season and subsequent seasons go by. That's how I've usually handled it. That doesn't mean that I won't go a little bit out there. For my Live 06 Dynasty, as I've said before, I brought Sean Kemp back. I put him back in the free agents pool and added him in the roster, put him in the free agents pool, lowered his ratings so that they'd be appropriate for how he was getting on in years and had declined by that point. Signed him. I didn't want to sign him before the dynasty happened. I wanted to put him in the free agents pool and have to negotiate with him and use up my salary cap to do that. But that made that game so much more memorable. But I do like to have that realistic start and, if you will, a fantastic finish or a fictional finish. But there is a comment on that article and in that original thread on OS that really sticks out to me, because I've never bothered, to that point, I've never bothered about updating the rosters so they reflect reality or having to start again to get the latest roster. But this comment from Kinsman7 describes a phenomenon that has definitely affected me over the years and calls it, rather than rosteritis, tradeitis. And he says, quote, "I'm never wildly concerned too much about what transactions are going on in real life, but I typically find that my main issue is that I'll make too many moves and regret it a couple of weeks later." So, and I've done that before. I almost messed up my aforementioned Live 06 Dynasty by making some moves where I felt like I'd ripped off the computer a bit too much. I got one of the top picks in the draft, or I traded one of the top picks in the draft, and suddenly had this very stacked roster, and it wasn't fun. So I made a couple other moves to kind of actually weaken my roster a bit, or balance it out a bit more, and then it was so much more fun after that. So making those wrong moves or stacking a team too early, if you're not doing a fantasy scenario where everybody is stacked, that can ruin it as well. And that ruins it for me more than not following real life.
And at that point, the person who realized that they made too many trades and they weren't enjoying their roster or the season as much, and maybe they were losing a little bit more, at that point, they realized how hard it is to be an NBA GM. I'm sure.
Oh,
because
yeah.
Because can you imagine kind of like overhauling your roster and just be like in the real NBA and being like, oh, crap. and you're just completely dissatisfied with the product, and your fans are dissatisfied, and then your franchise starts losing money and everything.
No reset button in real life. No reloading.
Yeah, no reset button. Yeah. Right, exactly. There's no reset button. Definitely feel that pain. Actually, my brother, Mark, my oldest brother, he has quit a couple seasons where we did fantasy drafts, and he pulled off a few trades early in the season because he was frustrated after a few losses. And the players that he got in return were just not fun for him. Like, he just wasn't performing well. He was losing even more, and we would have to start the season over. He is notorious, and I love him to death. My brother, Mark, is notorious for starting seasons over after a loss or after a couple losses. And it's not because he's a sore sport, because he's not a sore sport during the loss, right? It's because he loves winning to the point where the season often feels destroyed to him once there's a hint of weakness for the team. Like, he wants our team to have this basically undefeated record every time, whether it's him controlling the team by himself or all of us playing on the same team co-op. So I'm sure that's also a struggle for a lot of the community, where they want to feel invincible on a basketball court. They want to feel like they can dominate the computer. And then they suffer a loss, and suddenly their immortality is gone, right? Suddenly they lost to the CPU. Suddenly they lost to a team that maybe they shouldn't have lost to. And then all of a sudden, it's like, maybe I should start over with a new team. So I'm sure that's another reason.
Oh, for sure. And it's funny because I love that. I love, I want to frame this quickly. I don't enjoy losing per se, but in a season, if it happens, if I've performed poorly and a team that should, or even if a team that shouldn't beat me, does get a victory over me, that to me adds to the journey, to the story. Because I know that ultimately I probably will win the championship with my intervention, but getting a loss here or there, it keeps me on my toes. I actually do like that, but I understand that it is very frustrating, and I also will admit to, when I felt I was getting screwed over in the fourth quarter a couple of times, quitting on a game and restarting it, which, and my pride it actually hit my pride to do that, because I thought, no, I should have just taken the loss. But no, I totally get where that's coming from.
And you're definitely not the only person to do that either.
Yeah.
Where, things weren't going your way, and you're like, man, the computer is cheating me out of this game. I'm getting called for the most BS fouls. For some reason, I'm missing layups constantly, and they're making layups that, are incredibly difficult. But it's just unfair, so I'm going to quit. So that is definitely another common reason for, either quitting an individual game or just like starting a season over entirely. My recommendation to the community, if you're stuck and you don't know what team to use, I recommend using a team of players that you like in real life.
Yes.
And so, because you have a bond with those players, kind of like you feel a more closeness to those players. You feel like you can cheer for those players while you're using them, right? So because you're cheering for them in real life, you're going to cheer for them on the virtual hardwood. And also use a team that you feel like you can compete with on whatever difficulty you're playing on. And I highly recommend people not being stubborn. My brother and I are stubborn. My brother Nick and I are super stubborn. We always want to play on Hall of Fame, no matter what game. If it's Hall of Fame on 2K or it's Superstar on Live, we like that challenge. We will do whatever we possibly can to figure out the game so we can continue to beat the computer over and over and over again on those higher levels. However, that's not for everybody, and that's not what everybody wants for their experience. I highly recommend playing on All-Star or even Pro, depending on your skill level with the game, if you're having that much trouble on Superstar and Hall of Fame, because you're not going to want to play through a season if you keep getting your butt kicked. You're not going to want to play through the season if the action is frustrating on the floor. You'll never complete one. So to put your pride aside, try to play on All-Star or Pro, and maybe that experience will be a little bit better for you.
It was one of those questions I hated seeing people ask each other in our stories section. What difficulty are you playing on? Because it always felt accusatory. and saying, oh, this story isn't worth reading unless you're playing on the hardest difficulty. And certainly if you're dominating and on rookie level, it may not result in the most interesting story to share with your fellow gamers. But if you're having fun, that's the main thing. It always play for yourself and your own enjoyment, rather than... I mean, certainly I know everyone wants to cultivate an audience with their content, don't get me wrong, but all content creation has to come from personal enjoyment and passion. If you're not enjoying your time on the virtual hardwood, then that's going to come through as well. Speaking of setting up scenarios that didn't work out, I started a live 2002 franchise at one point. I may have told this story on the podcast before. I know I've told it in articles. But I started one with the Jazz, and I had this idea that I was just going to do something really wacky with the Jazz, because the Jazz are not a team that I normally play with. So I traded John Stockton for Mike Bibby, because at that time I was just getting Mike Bibby in every live 2002 franchise because I had one with the Kings and came to really enjoy Bibby. So I traded Stockton for Bibby, which is very unrealistic and weird. I moved Carmelo to the bench and made him into a bench player, and then traded for Scottie Pippen and had this really weird Jazz lineup. It lasted about 3 games, Derek, before I was like, this is dumb. This isn't enjoyable. It was like, the idea of it was funnier than actually playing through the franchise. So it's very easy to... Some of these just don't pan out, and it's very easy to ruin the game by doing something kind of silly. Silly can be a lot of fun, don't get me wrong, but sometimes it's just a bit too silly.
Yeah, that Bibby Stockton trade makes absolutely no sense.
Not at all.
And then moving Karl Malone to the bench and bringing Pippen over, who my guess is he wouldn't even have liked playing in Utah. But yeah, that's very, very strange. I don't know. Like, this is why my brothers and I have such a loose, fun experience when we're doing like fantasy draft scenarios. We've been doing fantasy drafts for decades now. And why my brother and I love doing the Legends co-op, my NBA, my league, or season, whatever, in whatever game we're playing. And because we don't have to think about, these wild, unrealistic trades or wild, unrealistic scenarios, because the whole league is wild. Right? The whole league is unrealistic. All the rosters, all the players that are on the teams in the rosters, most of the time, they didn't even play together. They never, played on the floor together and whatnot. So it's just this fun experience, trying to get wins, trying to make great highlights, accumulate stats, etc. Another thing that I want to say too is there's also burnout with roster making. People getting through a little bit of a roster. Maybe they're trying to, update the ratings and attributes for like an NBA roster, or they're trying to create like a current NBA roster, or they're trying to create like a past season like 03 or 04, and they just quit. And most of the time, it's not because they don't have the time to finish the roster. It's because they become disinterested during the process. Right? Or they realize it's more work than they thought it was going to be. So there's a lot of rosters out there, a lot of talented roster makers too. There's a lot of rosters out there that never get finished or never get close to finish, because just like in a season where you're using a team that's not that fun on the floor, you realize that you took on a project that maybe wasn't that fun for you. And I'm going to put you on the spot here, Andrew.
Yeah.
I feel like that's what happened on NBA 2K11.
Yes.
When
definitely.
You admitted that, I think, in the past, but you tried to create a current roster for NBA 2K11, like an NBA roster. I think it was 2021 or 1920.
It was a few years. It kept getting pushed forward, actually, because of delays and me not knowing some of the things with the roster files as well, and then hitting a snag and trying to work it out and getting frustrated with, this doesn't work the same way as, I'm not new to making rosters for basketball games. I've been making them since the 90s, but mostly for NBA Live. So, in fact, as far as public releases go, entirely for NBA Live. So there are things that are very similar with the process, but from some technical aspects of working with the databases and the roster files, there are obviously differences with how they work. And there are some ways that lives work better and are much easier to work with, and there are ways that 2Ks are much more convenient and better to work with. But there were some snags that I hit, and it just kind of kept pushing it back. And look, as I said, there's some minimalist projects that I'm looking at doing for some of the 2Ks and lives in this year. I'll be working on it for March Madness. But yeah, that current roster update definitely derailed by the fact that I was hitting those snags, and again, not having that same passion for the current NBA product as before.
Right. You don't want to be working with Kyle Kuzma. You don't want to be creating Kyle Kuzma in the edit player screen. You want to be creating Antonio McDyess.
Yes.
Like that's because I know you that well. Like you love the classic NBA. You love classic seasons. You enjoy all-time rosters. You love the 90s NBA. That's your favorite era and everything. So again, it's not Kuzma. You want to be working on like McDyess or Sharif Abdur-Rahim or Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf or, doing a mod for Christian Laettner. Like that is way more up your alley.
Yes, definitely. And that unfortunately that derailed what was intended to be a pretty, I had all intention of making it, and
it looked good. It looked good.
It was coming together, but unfortunately, it was just too many. And then, of course, as those drawbacks and those roadblocks kept popping up, then that would just push it further along. And all of a sudden, I'm halfway through the 2020 season, and now 2021 is starting. This is a couple of years ago, obviously. So it just kept pushing it back, and it was like I'm making people wait. And a couple other people came out with some 2K11 current rosters that were quite good, and they're in the modding section, the 2K11 modding section. I would definitely recommend checking them out, and I put together a bit of a guide to use them if people weren't sure how to install them. So I even offered a little bit of support for somebody else's mod, which I don't usually do. But yeah, it's a shame that happened. But you always come back to it.
Yeah, I think that moving forward, you've noticed that I haven't done a lot of modding over the last 3 NBA 2Ks. Moving forward, when I do create mods and I really get deep into a modding project, like I am with NBA 2K19 right now, it's got to be something that I know I'm going to love doing. It's got to be something that I'm going to enjoy, that I know that the majority of the project I'm going to enjoy working on it, whether it's making portraits for it, making cyber faces, converting cyber faces, working on the players individually, because that's a big part of it, as you know.
Oh, yes.
You want to be able to be editing players that, from an era that you enjoy. So, editing their attribute signatures, watching film to get their signatures right, badges, all of that stuff. Like I'm going to make sure I'm, and I have been doing that the last few years, but make sure that if I'm going to take on a project, it's going to be something that I really enjoy doing. But yeah, I'm going to go back to what I said to kind of close this segment, Andrew. And I think you would agree. If you're stuck on what team to choose a team, for a season, for a my league, my NBA, etc. Choose a team of players that you like. So like you like watching them in real life. You like a lot of the players on the team, like their personalities, who they are, etc., their play styles. That is going to go a long way in giving you better chances to finish, a season and whatnot. And then also make sure that team is not incredibly weak, because if you rack up a lot of losses early in the season, you're not going to finish. Point blank, you will not finish. And then also difficulty level. Make sure that you're playing on a difficulty level that suits your skill level. That way, don't feel pressured to play on Superstar and Hall of Fame if your skill level doesn't suit that, or if the game is just so unrealistic on those levels when you play it that you just don't enjoy it. So I think those are the 3 main things.
I agree. That's absolutely the key. And I love the comparison to modding there, because there is that stretch of making a roster mod, as you noted, editing all the players, getting all the fiddly bits to go with all the badges and tendencies and everything else that you need to do to make sure you have a detailed roster update, and it's not just a copy and paste job. That it's the same with playing through a season in franchise, or even just a single season. There's that stretch after the All-Star break, I feel, that can get there's just a big lull. It can drag a lot because you're just ready for the playoffs if you are playing 82 games and on 12-minute quarters, as you and I often like to do. So there is that lull that you need to push through, just like with a big roster mod. And again, going back to my 2002 ill-fated Jazz franchise there, sometimes the idea, whether it's a franchise game or a roster mod, sometimes the idea is more appealing than the reality and everything it's going to take to make it enjoyable. So I absolutely agree. Picking that team that appeals to you. Make sure you like the team's branding. Make sure you like the players on the team. If you have a favorite team, that's obviously a default choice that you can go with. And of course, if you are looking to rebuild and wheel and deal, get a team that actually has some assets to do that, or it's not going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, there are times you need to push through a little bit, and it is there is that case of rosteritis or FOMO of missing out on those updated rosters, or you can definitely ruin it with a bad trade. But yeah, franchise mode can be so much fun, as I can attest. I have drifted towards the career modes in recent years, But I do love franchise modes, and I'm sure I'll go back to them at some point in the future.
Yeah, and I just want to bring this up real quick. You mentioned 12-minute quarters. That's another thing that can really bring a season to a close real early, is if you feel like the games are too long.
Definitely.
Andrew and I play on 12-minute quarters because the stat accumulation, we want it to be realistic. If you don't care about the stat accumulation being realistic, or you're okay with the numbers being a little bit lower, try 10-minute quarters, try 8-minute quarters. Hell, Andrew and I just had a blast playing NBA Live 10, Nuggets versus Knicks, 6-minute quarters. That was fun, right?
That's
we didn't really care about the stats.
For exhibition games.
Yeah, 6 minutes. Yeah, 6 minutes. So half of a real NBA game. But think about how much faster that you'd be able to get through the games, and you'd still be accumulating stats just at a lower rate than real life. But you'd still be fighting for wins. You can still do trades. The performance of the players still matter. All of that stuff. But you'd be able to get through a season quicker. And then if you like multiple seasons quicker. So don't feel like you have to play 12-minute quarters.
And of course, some games, specifically 2K, do have stats normalization, so you can actually adjust those stats, certainly the minutes, for full-length quarters if that kind of if you're like us and like those realistic stats.
And they also have shortened seasons where you can play like a 27-game season or something like that, or a season around 50 games. Like those are options in NBA 2K. So also don't feel tied to an 82-game season. If you want to, get through a season, go through the playoffs and have that experience, which I think how Stildo 33 works, who I'm playing with on the NBA 2K19 94-95 season. In the past, it's all about, getting through that season and getting into the postseason and, just like finishing it. So like, don't feel tied to the 82 games either. And actually one last thing, Andrew, I know I'm talking a lot about this. If you want motivation to move forward on a season and you're enjoying the game that you're playing, try sharing some of your highlights on Twitter or on, create a YouTube channel or add them to your existing YouTube channel and, maybe even stream your season. So these are just some options to keep you motivated. And, you can upload game highlight videos or the full games to YouTube. You can get people talking about your season and everything, and that can motivate you to move on to the next game. Content creation and content sharing is definitely a motivator for a lot of people when it comes to, season franchise play, etc.
Oh, I absolutely agree. No, I think sharing that with your fellow gamers, that's why people were doing the story threads in the forum for so many years. It encouraged them to keep playing, and getting that feedback from people enjoying that story was always a blast as well. But thank you to Kid Cash for the suggestion of that topic. We are franchise gamers from way back. We can definitely relate to that rosteritis and tradeitis and some of the ways that you can ruin a franchise game, but also how you can really enjoy it. So we love sharing that advice, Derek.
100%. And you'll continue to see highlights go up on the NLSC YouTube and my personal YouTube of franchise gameplay, whether it be NBA Live games or NBA 2K. And we can't get enough of franchise modes.
But Derek, it is that time again. So how about we open up the mailbag?
To the mailman. Slamming it down with a nasty dunk.
So I asked the community, what player or team got you in to basketball? And then the second part of that question is, as a result, have you gravitated to that player/team in video games?
And as always, we got some great responses from our community. First up is NC to the Bone, says, I'm a diehard Jordan fan, but the teams that really made me fall in love with basketball were the 80s Lakers and Pistons. Seeing what a team was, you had stars, but the importance of team was second to none. How the goal of getting better and competing was on display nightly. Yeah,
so I love the fact that he's a hardcore Jordan fan, but when it comes to team basketball, he thinks of the Lakers and the Pistons. And two different styles as well. The Lakers, Showtime, fast-paced, fast break, play style. And you had the Pistons, especially in the late 80s when they had Rodman and Mahorn and whatnot. You have the, kind of the beat 'em up bad boy style. And two different styles of play, but two teams that were so formidable in the 80s. The Pistons with 2 titles, the Lakers with 5. I love, that he mentioned those 2 teams. And also loyalty. He mentioned team. Like basically with a capital T. You had, Magic Johnson sticking with the franchise throughout the whole 80s. Same with Kareem. Worthy was a staple all the way up until he retired in the early 90s. You had, the same faces on those teams, mostly every year. As far as the big names, with the Pistons, they stuck with Dumars and Lambeer and Isaiah Thomas. And sure, the small forwards switched out every now and then. Like they had Kelly Tripucka, then they had Adrian Dantley, and then they, moved on to Mark Aguirre, who ended up being a great piece for their championship squads and whatnot. But the bones of those teams stayed the same for a long time. And loyalty, which I don't even know if you can say that hardly anybody in the NBA today is loyal. Loyalty was a big thing back then.
And I guess it made it easier to be a fan of a one team. We see a lot of fans these days are fans of players more so than teams, and they follow that player around, which I guess always happened. But when you did have that team together for longer, and the star was going to probably be there for at least somewhere in the range of 10 years or more, then you were able to stick with that team a little bit easier. So I guess I understand that change in fandom with players moving on, with big stars moving on a bit more often these days. So I get that, but I do miss those days of knowing that the lineup, at least the 2 or 3 players in the lineup, were probably going to be there for close to a decade if a team was successful.
Right, 100%. And you can just go down the line in the NBA back then and see that, like Neek and Willis on the Hawks, and then, Stockton and Malone on the Jazz, and then obviously Bird, McHale, and Parrish on the Celtics. There are just so many different examples in the NBA back then of players being loyal to their franchise, but also their franchises being loyal to them.
Absolutely.
Right. And letting those teams gel and work together and get better each year. And I definitely miss that about the NBA.
Next up, we have Teddy Bear the Gamer. Says, Michael Jordan got me into really watching the NBA. I live in Indianapolis, so we got WGCN, which is Chicago's network. So I got to see every Chicago Bulls game. And man, when the Bulls would play the Pacers, the city would be electric. And of course, as a Bulls fan who has never been to Chicago and never got to see MJ live, although I certainly watched many games on TV, I do envy that.
Yeah, Teddy Bear the Gamer is old school, and I love it. He loves the 90s NBA just like we do, and you see that in his top 10 highlights that he submits for the countdown. I'll never forgive Reggie Miller for that push-off on Jordan to get that three-pointer in the playoffs. A blatant push, Andrew. He pushes him with 2 hands and extends both of his arms, and he gets open for that 3.
People don't talk about that one. They talk about the finals push, but not that one.
Yeah, they don't talk about that one for some reason. Why is that? I don't know. But Jordan and Kobe were not super fond of Reggie Miller's antics and his tactics, and kind of thought he was somewhat of a cheap player. I personally always thought he was super cocky, but I always respected Reggie Miller as like an overall competitor. I think you would agree. I think he was super clutch. He always wanted the big shot. He had guts. Great shooter, one of the greatest shooters of all time. And people forget, he was a 6'7" shooting guard, and that's actually very rare today. That is a tall shooting guard, and he was very good. I think that from the replies you can tell there's a lot of Jordan fans. I'm sure that makes you happy.
Oh, it definitely does. And also loved Teddy's highlight, as you know, in this week's top 10, where he kind of replicated that 92 first-round series with the Heat that I love so much. Now, that was actually before I really got into basketball, that series. But I got the tapes from Pontel and watched that series. I've watched it so many times since. After the fact, that is a spectacular series, at least if you're a Bulls fan.
Yeah, and his dunk in that top 10 was right on Ronnie Cycli, who, as a DJ in real life, by the way, he was a DJ, I believe, as a player, and then even after he retired, which is a cool little fun fact about him. But
so not a DJ before he got into the NBA, so not like 2K18's My Career Story. He went from basketball player to DJ, not DJ to basketball. Interesting.
Right, exactly. But he was also a very underrated player, and I've talked about him and shared highlights on Twitter on him before. Ronnie Cycli was very good.
Next up is Leo, that is Valor in the Forum, member of NLSC Thrill-Ho, of course. 96 Finals Game 2, first basketball I had watched. Rodman grabbed 11 offensive rebounds, still a record. Bulls win. I became a Bulls fan after that. They are definitely the first pick for any Live/2K Dynasty franchise saves. And I know how much Leo loves the Bulls, just as I do. And yeah, he will take the Bulls as his first pick, unless he's going for an expansion. Unless he's going for expansion teams, which he's also done.
You and Leo have that in common because 95-96 is the year that solidified your Bulls fandom and Jordan fandom.
It is indeed, yeah.
And whatnot. So you guys have that in common. Yeah, what a legendary season. 72-10, and Jordan was my brothers and I, whenever we talk about somebody hitting their peak, like a player is in their prime or something like that, or an actor is in their prime, we say, well, that's the 95-96 Jordan version of that player or that actor, etc. Because when you watch Jordan in 95-96, it's like that was the most mature version, in my opinion, of Michael Jordan as a basketball player, the way he picked his spots, how dominant he was in the mid-range, in the post, because some of his he was still probably the most athletic player in the league, in my opinion, when you combine strength, quickness, open court speed and everything. But his athleticism wasn't what it was in like 88, 89, and 87, 88, etc. So he had to find other ways to be dominant, and he did. And so he was such a smart defensive player and offensive player in that 95-96 season. That was like peak Jordan.
There's a reason that I've created that 96 season in rosters for subsequent games.
Oh, no, 100%.
Next up, we have King J Mace, says Kobe and AI. Was a huge Laker fan as a little kid. And yes, I think for people who came along a little bit younger than us, Derek, those are the players that were top of the league and the cool players to like. And certainly there was a reason to like those players, Kobe and Iverson. I think there's a lot of fans that are a bit younger than us, just slightly younger than us, that came along, started watching a little bit later, around about that time that they were coming into their own. Those are the players that got them into the league, just as maybe MJ for us or Magic and Bird for people slightly older than us.
I don't know. I think that Kobe and AI are as much my generation even as it is King J Mace, even though he's a bit younger than me. Because if you think about it, when Iverson came into the league and Kobe, I was still a young teenager.
Oh, sure. But it wasn't your first exposure. It wasn't your first exposure, though. That's what I mean.
No, it wasn't my first exposure. My first exposure was back in 90-91. That's the season I remember. Like the first season I remember, it was watching D. Brown in the Celtics and Larry Bird in his second to last season, and watching that, D. Brown in the dunk contest beating Sean Kemp that year, and them getting to the playoffs and Bird bouncing his face off the floor against the Pacers, and then coming back and willing the Celtics to victory, and the Celtics beating the Pacers in that first round series, and Chuck Person and Larry Bird trash talking. That was my first exposure. It was 90-91. However, I was a fan of Iverson when he was in Georgetown. I always tried to catch the Georgetown games because I was a huge Iverson fan. And then I was still a teenager and playing actually for my high school basketball team when Iverson and Kobe were just becoming, not just becoming, they were, at that point, young household names. And my freshman year of high school, our shoes for the basketball team were Iversons. That's what everybody on our team voted to have Iversons be our basketball shoes. So we all wore black and white Iversons that year when I played basketball. So yeah, I think that Kobe and AI are huge names in my household, and I consider them part of my youth as well.
Oh no, I definitely agree there. I just meant as far as being those first players that were that you, when you first started watching,
the first influence, right? Yeah. I see what you're saying. You're talking about more like the first influence. Your first influence was Jordan,
exactly. Yeah,
in the Bulls, and mine was D. Brown, Larry Bird, and the Celtics.
That's what I was getting at. Yeah, but I certainly, that they are part of. They were there playing as MJ's contemporaries, as young players, so they're definitely part of that MJ generation. As the latter part of it, obviously, but certainly part of it as well. Speaking of Larry Bird, One Kidney Kenny, still though, of course. Larry Bird, obviously, started really watching them in the spring of '87, and that's the team that started it all. Been a fan of the games ever since, have a Celtics bias, of course, but love the game. The Penny Shaq Magic and 90s Pacers are my next favourite players' teams after the Celtics. And yes, we know how much he loves the Penny and Shaq Magic.
I feel like he threw bias in there as to reference Len bias, because him and I have talked a lot on the phone. We've talked through text and everything, and his love for Len Bias and what could have been if Len Bias had donned a Celtics uniform and hadn't tragically passed away before ever setting foot on a basketball court with the Celtics. It's big. Like, he absolutely loves Len Bias. Len Bias was an incredible college basketball player. His potential was through the roof. And I know how much he loves Bird. And I believe at this point right now, still lives in Indiana. So he's a Pacers fan as well. So none of that surprises me, but I swear he threw Bias in there, just as a reference to Len Bias.
Let's give him the credit for that. Let's say that happened. Yeah.
100%.
Next up is Stephen, the Live King, says Reggie Miller, been a Pacers fan ever since. So he may disagree with a couple of our Miller takes.
I know he's a hardcore Pacers fan, and I love his Twitter comments related to the current Pacers because he just gets so frustrated with the team at times. I do wonder how he feels about Paul George, because he had made a comment where, there's no way that Paul George should have been included on the All-Star team this year. And I agree with him, but because there were more deserving players. But I wonder if part of that is he saw that Paul George is not on the Pacers anymore, right? Because I know there was a lot of people that loved Paul George when he was on the Pacers, and he was the franchise player and whatnot. And I wonder how he felt about Paul George when he was with Indiana and how he ended up leaving Indiana. But the Live King's such a cool guy, and I really appreciate his highlights for the top 10, and I love his YouTube videos, his gameplay footage, whether it be like NBA Live or NBA 2K and whatnot. But I would like to pick his brain at some point about the Pacers and how he feels about Paul George.
Definitely, agreed, and one of the great content creators and members of the community that we have. And of course, Paul George, another player that moved on a year after appearing on a cover. He was on the 2K17 cover and then moved on the very next year. So, bit of cover trivia there.
There you go.
Next up is Chuck LA92, says MJ in 1990, and that is definitely a hell of a time to get on the bandwagon.
My God. I mean, MJ in 1990, if you're talking about the 90-91 season, that's his first title. That's him beating, Magic Johnson and the Lakers in the NBA Finals. But man, he was putting up numbers at that point, and his scoring was off the charts. From like 86, 87, all the way up until his first retirement. And then he came back and, then averaged 30.4 in his return in 95, 96. But that young Jordan, my brother and I talk about it. We talk about the 95, 96 Jordan as the mature Jordan on the court, as maybe the prime Jordan. But that young 80s, early 90s Jordan was just so ridiculous to watch because of his speed and his quickness, his open floor speed, and just dunking on everybody, and his acrobatic layups like the one versus the Nets and whatnot, where he jumps from one side of the backboard to the other and goes through like 2 or 3 different defenders and finishes it on the opposite side of the rim. There's nothing like watching highlights of that young Jordan.
And look, I love DeMar DeRozan, really enjoy his game, and having won the Bulls, and he is an all-star again this year, deservingly so, but he is not young MJ.
That is so insulting to Jordan. I'm really sorry. That's just stupid talk. Like, it's ridiculous. It's I don't even want to get into that. It bothers me.
Yeah, no, me too. Next up is Juicy Shack Meat. I got into the NBA and basketball full time after watching my late uncle playing as the Lakers in NBA Live 2002 for PS1. I was a Lakers fan for a while because of that. I've switched to being a Pistons fan ever since 2004, and I've been using them regularly on the virtual hardwood.
Wait a minute. So he was a Lakers fan and then a Pistons fan after 2004. So that Pistons team that beat the Lakers team in the 2004 finals, Rip, Ben Wallace, Rasheed Wallace, Tayshaun Prince, Chauncey Billups, Corliss Williamson, and whatnot, that you switched to the Pistons after they beat the Lakers. I'm going to have to talk to you a little bit more about that on the Discord, because I find that fascinating. I think it's cool. I think that the Pistons were a very likable team because they beat the Lakers in 2004. I think you would agree. I think they were not favored in the least to win that series. It was, the Kobe and Shaq show. They had just won 3 championships in 99, 2000, 2001, and 01, 02 and whatnot. But yeah, that I don't think I've heard of that many people doing that.
I think the Pistons did get a lot of fans that year because I remember when they assembled what was then our idea of a super team, getting in Karl Malone, getting in Gary Payton, and teaming them up with Shaq and Kobe, obviously. A lot of people felt that they had bought a championship, and some of the fans were very vocal and maybe a bit obnoxious about their chances that year, and understandably so. And who knows what would have happened if Karl Malone was healthier that year. But yeah, the Pistons came along and dethroned them and was denied them that championship rather. And I think they got a few fans out of that.
And they weren't a fluke either, because they made it to the finals the next season and played the Spurs.
Took them to the limit, yeah.
2005, and took them to the limit. And what an amazing series that was, defensively, especially for both teams. But yeah, no, I think that's fascinating. Going from the fan of a team, like a hardcore fan of a team, and then switching to the team that beat them. That's something that I don't think I've heard many times before.
Next up, we have Ricky says, Larry Bird. Not a Celtics fan, actually not having a team I support, but when playing 2K, I always pick the worst team or the hardest to rebuild in my league. Though I tend to go Hornets, Magic, Pistons, Kings, Sixers a lot, mainly play 2K16 and 17 nowadays. And of course, shout out to you for playing 2K16 and 17. Forget the people who say it's just nostalgia. Those games are fantastic. I've been playing them recently myself. They are great.
Yeah, 2K16 and 2K17 are some of the best in the series, and it uses that old motion system, which we really enjoy, Andrew and I. It still doesn't get old revisiting those games for me. They're still part of our regular rotation all these years later. As far as starting a franchise with like the worst team in the league, all the power to you. If you can do that and still get wins, and also handle the setbacks that you're going to have during that season, all the power to you. And I think that you're probably a more patient gamer than most.
Definitely,
if you're willing to do that.
Definitely, yeah. Next up, we have the Big Steppers. I always had basketball, but never really cared. That all changed when seeing LeBron dominate with Miami, and then being the closest team to where I live. Easy, no-brainer. Add in the fact that NBA 2K14 had him as the cover athlete, I was hooked. So yeah, there's a bit more of a recent example there with LeBron.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the younger generation that's playing today grew up with LeBron being mostly the face of the NBA, and then obviously him and Curry in tandem, as opposed to growing up with Kobe being the face of one of the big faces of the NBA, and KG and Duncan and whatnot. Or, like you and I, we grew up and enjoyed both. Like, we were when Jordan was the face of the NBA, and then, when Kobe and whatnot were. But if you think about it, people that watched LeBron in Miami and became LeBron James fans as a result, those kids were probably teenagers at the time. So let's say there's a 12-year-old out there, a 13-year-old watching basketball, and he becomes a fan of LeBron when he went to Miami. That was 13 years ago. That kid is now 26, right? So that's wild to think about. But a lot of the kids that were in their, early teens when LeBron joined Miami in the early 2010s, these guys are now in their mid-20s.
Exactly, yeah.
So it makes me feel old. Yeah, but that's the reality of the situation, right?
It is indeed. To that point, Mizuki, she says, first games I saw were the 2010 finals with my mum, but I really started following because of LeBron and the Heat the next year. As a result, I do follow the Heat and LeBron in real life and in 2K.
See, and she tied it back to video games, which I like. So she uses the Miami Heat in 2K. I wonder if she's using classic teams or if she's using the now Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Hero Heat. But yeah, no, that's great. She says she's a Heat fan to this day, so I'm guessing that she still enjoys this now current Heat team.
It sounds like that, and of course they've got a couple of decent players, not the least of which is Jimmy Butler.
Right. I actually like Jimmy Butler as a competitor. Even though he had that whole year of sitting out for general soreness. You saw that meme go around where he was dressed as a general and whatnot. I'm not a big fan of players sitting out unless they're, truly hurt or something's really preventing them from playing. But I do like Jimmy Butler overall, when he steps in between the lines. I like him as a competitor.
There was that year where he kind of was a bit, reputation took a bit of a hit. It sounded like he was a bit of a diva or a bully behind the scenes, but he's really proven to be a leader.
No, 100%. And that Heat team goes as he goes. And that's been the case since he got there.
And finally, we have an awesome, great long response from Mike here, MP3 in the forum, of course. Says, I was 10 years old, 1990, when I went to high school and introduced to basketball. An older kid from Boston who moved to UK told me about the NBA and a player called Larry Bird. He passed me many VHS tapes, his family sent over of Boston games, and I learned to love the game. This year marks my 20th year as a member of the NLSC forum. I've met a lot of people there along the years that I consider friends, and I'm truly grateful for the interactions we've had over the years. The Celtics led to me watching more NBA, and of course hard not to get caught up in the whole Jordan and the Bulls era in 91, which led me to becoming a Knicks fan, watching Starks give 0 Fs while guarding Jordan, and I admired that plus the hard defense. Watching the NBA, playing basketball led to a nasty ankle injury, and due to being sidelined, I took salvage in a new game on Nintendo called NBA Live 95, and my love for NBA video gaming. It was NBA Live 2002 that led me to the site we all know and love, the NLSC. So thank you as always for the support, Mike, and that's an awesome story.
20 years as a member on the NLSC. I'm clapping for you. That's just a long time. And I know that you've always been a loyal member, and, I've had many interactions with you, and you seem like such a great guy. Your beginnings started similar to mine as fandom. Yours was with Larry Bird. Mine was with Dee Brown, the Celtics, Reggie Lewis, and Larry Bird in general. So it was like that whole Celtics team in 90, 91. As far as NBA Live 95, that was a big release for a lot of people. I personally spent more time on NBA Live 96 for the Sega Genesis. Great game to get started with on, the virtual hardwood. And thanks for being a member on the NLSC.
100%. And it is kind of overwhelming to think of how long some of us have been around. I've discovered the site. I didn't found it. Tim Lutz and Brian did back in 1996, and I discovered it in 1997 when my family got the internet. And I've kind of been around ever since and been in the forums pretty much since it launched. I think 98, 99-ish when I first registered my account and started to the original forum, the Black and Blue days. And obviously been running it since August 2001. So it's always great to see the veterans around and enjoying the facilities and taking part in what we do at the NLSC. And just loving basketball games as we do.
And back in 1998 is my first exposure to the NLSC because I had to get DB Commander, to be able to mod NBA Live 98. So I may not have been a member the entire time, up until recently, but because I think I re-registered for the NLSC in 2013.
Yes.
But man,
well, that's 10 years now.
I've known about the NLSC forever, and I was using it back in the late 90s. So I feel like a super veteran still.
Oh, for sure. And it's always cool to see people pop up from time to time and you recognize the old username if they haven't logged in for a while, or if they've signed up again. They were in the old forum and didn't sign up when we switched to the new boards in 2002, and say, hey, it's great to see you guys still going. And, I'm sharing some of those memories from the old days and some kind words about the fact we're still going. And, we're not going anywhere. No,
absolutely not. In fact, the content is growing.
But thank you for all of those responses, everyone. It's really cool to hear about the origin stories, Derek, and hear that from our fellow basketball gamers and fans, because we obviously are both.
No, it's definitely awesome. We have a great community here at the NLSC, and I feel like most of the people that interact with our content either played themselves in real life or at least fans of the real life sport as well, and the real life NBA, whether it be past or present. So it's really cool to interact with them on all of this.
No, it always is, and we look forward to interacting with you as you, Derek, throw out more mailbag prompts. And it's one of our favorite segments to do every week.
No, I love it. I love hearing from the community. I love getting your clips for the top 10. Please continue.
But that has brought us to the end of this week's show. As always, we thank you for tuning in and invite you to join us again next week, either on the NLSC, nb-live.com, our YouTube channel, or your podcast app of choice. In the meantime, please connect with us on social media. That's where you can stay in touch with us and, of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So, Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
Yeah, you can reach me on Twitter, where I'm the most active, at D43G or at D4384. Preferably connect with me on both. I'm also on YouTube, D43, and on the NLSC as a team member, D43.
I am Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on Twitter. The NLSC is on Twitter and Facebook at the NLSC. Our Instagram is NLSC Basketball. We're on YouTube at youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. And of course, give a look to the NLSC itself, nb-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.